Hello there guys, my name is MrYorkiesWorld, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a review of SimWings, or in brackets Aerosoft, Mega Airport London Heathrow Professional for P3D version 4. Now, just as a quick introduction, Heathrow has always been a massive airport for the flight sim community. It's been very controversial because not many people have been able to get the airport really working, and by working I mean performance-wise working. It will work, but a lot of people have had performance issues with it. So, if you've seen one of the recent videos on my channel, you will know by now that I did a departure out of London Heathrow in the British Airways 747-400 by PMDG, and I managed to get a pretty decent FPS, really. I would say between 30 and 45 FPS in the virtual cockpit, and outside of the virtual cockpit, we're looking at least sort of 50 to 60 FPS, and I'll go into the details of that in a future video. But for now, the review. So, I've been very lucky to have been given this piece of software, courtesy of my friends over at flightsim.com. I will leave a link to it in the description, and I would highly recommend that you check out all the other content over at the flightsim.com store. They do have some really good stuff over there. So, let's get started. So, obviously, London Heathrow, the main attraction being that it is one of the busiest airports and one of the largest airports, in fact, within the United Kingdom. It's got thousands and thousands of flights arriving and departing out of it daily. That's in real life, and also if you went on VATSIM, I mean, I personally don't go on VATSIM, but I would imagine, and I've seen in the past, that it's been very busy on there as well, because it is a massive airport. Let's face it. Now, this particular version of the scenery, again, this is Aerosoft. There is another version which is UK 2000, and I do own both of them now. But the reason I'm doing the review of the Aerosoft one is because this is the one that I've got the best performance out of. This particular version of the scenery has been available since November 2018, and many of the simulation enthusiasts have called it, as I was saying before, a must-have product for the scenery library, for your particular scenery library, which I do agree with. I'm extremely happy to be able to review it, and it's it really is a huge piece of scenery, and coverage area, we're talking at least 42 square kilometres of scenery outside of the actual airport itself. So it includes the airport, but it also has like 42 square kilometres, which is huge. On the outskirts of the airport as well, which is absolutely fantastic. Again, that's an approximate. I believe it does say over on the Aerosoft website or what have you. That's what it has. So it's not just the airport that you can see. You can see all the surrounding bits as well. It's fully detailed in terms of buildings and scenery to make the terminal and the airport grounds look as accurate as it possibly can. And it does have all of the sort of main taxiways, the main runways, and things like that, the main sort of gates, if you will, and stands that the real airport does have as well. Obviously, you can change the settings in your simulator to show or hide certain amounts of detail for this scenery. So the amount of detail that you saw in the video that I created, the departure video, might not necessarily be what you see, because that was based on my own setup and my own options in the simulator. It does have its own configurator tool as well, so everyone's experience with the scenery is more than likely, like I said, it's going to be different. I was extremely impressed by the sheer level of detail, even with my settings, which are slightly toned down. In fact, I would say a lot toned down. I have like a specific scenery settings preset for certain sort of environmental scenarios, if we can call it that. So Heathrow, for example, will be under my high scenery setting, or very high scenery setting. But even with that, with a lot of the sliders to the left, I'm still able to say that I could see a lot of autogen. I could see some trees when in fact my autogen trees were turned off. So obviously some of the trees are included within that 42 square kilometre sort of radius outside of the airport itself that Aerosoft have put in. So that's good, and it all adds to the effect. One major concern with any scenery such as this is how complex it is, and what sort of impact that's going to have on performance. There have been a lot, and I mean a lot, of horror stories, and including my own horror story, where people simply cannot get the Heathrow scenery to work, or they can, but it won't perform well on their system. Some people have even claimed they've gone down to single-figure FPS with an inability to reach even 10 or 20 FPS. Now, I myself have been very lucky in terms of performance because my system has an i9 at 9900K CPU, which is overclocked to 5 GHz on turbo. I've got a GTX 1080 Ti, which, to be honest, the GPU is not as important, but it is important in sort of heavy scenery areas, but just not as much as the CPU. And I was able to get a solid 30 to 40 FPS. Again, outside of the virtual cockpit, I'm getting up to 60, sometimes even 45 FPS inside the virtual cockpit. So dependent on sort of weather and scenery settings and stuff, you might be able to sort of tweak a few things. But overall, I didn't really have to change much, or what I would consider to be much, in order to get it working the way that I wanted it to work. And I can handle sort of going down to like 25 FPS. That doesn't really bother me, as long as it's smooth and I'm not sort of using what would be known in the flight sim world as a PowerPoint presentation, or that's what it seems like. As long as I'm not getting that, I'm absolutely fine. You will also want to have a look at your Orbex settings in terms of performance, because your Orbex, if you've got FTX Global and Vector and things like that, you can actually reduce down some of the options within that in the FTX Central Configurator tool that will sort of help with FPS for this particular scenery as well. So I would take a look at that, and there's plenty of videos on what you need to do and tweaks and stuff like that. There's plenty of stuff out there, so I'll not go into detail. Now, in terms of most of the graphics, I was extremely impressed to see the high-resolution ground textures, which, again, they span the full area of the airport and its surrounding areas to some extent. And I was also impressed to see the terminal buildings, the airport signage, the immersive aspects of the scenery are very well modelled, in fact, and textured. So it's not just a case of, they've just thrown a few buildings in there and it looks decent. It does look as close to what I would say the real thing would look like. I mean, I've not actually seen London Heathrow Airport in real life. I've not been there. It's one of the airports I would love to fly from. But from pictures, comparing it with this scenery, I would say, yeah, it's pretty close. Now, one small issue I did have with this scenery was the textures at night. Now, I'm going to go into that. I noticed a bit of an issue with when it's at night time, you've got dynamic lighting switched on and all that. If you're using tomato shade, and in specific, or specifically if you're using particular tomato shade presets, you might find you get grainy ground textures. Now, what I mean by that is they look a little bit pixelated, and it's sort of like a surface refraction, sort of wet, pixelated, grainy. I don't know how to explain it. That is not something that is Aerosoft's fault. I actually went over to the AvSim forums and posted something on this. One of the Aerosoft guys very, very quickly came to me and was extremely helpful in identifying what the issue was. And it turned out that the issue was actually tomato shade. So I changed over to Rex Environment Force to control all that for me and to use their shaders. And that works absolutely perfectly without me having any issues at all. Might be the same case with yourself. You might have to change to Rex Environment Force or change to a different preset, but it's definitely not, on this occasion anyway, something to do with the scenery. And it has been resolved now. That issue has been resolved for me completely. So before going to Aerosoft, I would highly recommend, although they're very helpful about it and they will give you all the support you need, I would highly recommend just trying to change things in terms of your own setup before you sort of blame it on the scenery. So that is it. That's basically all I've got to say about that. There's a lot there, a lot of information to take in when it comes to performance and graphics, and that's because it is a very complex airport. So features from the developer then. So Aerosoft doesn't disappoint. They've never disappointed. I've got quite a few of their different scenery items and different products, in fact, and none of them I've had any major issues with. I've always been very impressed. So there's a full list of features from the developer. If you want to pause the video here, I've took a screenshot of that and you can sort of look through all the different features. Just a few of them. It's got stuff like the P3D version 4 SDK, so everything's been optimized for that and recompiled, which is obviously good. The ground layout, including detailed aerial imagery created according to P3D version 4 SDK. So again, it's very much being optimized for the latest version of P3D, which is version 4 at the time of making this video, so that's pretty good. Optimised 3D runway lights, brilliant. The AFCAD approaches have been changed to AIRAC 1708, so they've actually paid attention to the SIDS and stars and stuff like that to make it more realistic, which is, again, something that I would say is a necessity in a piece of software. If you really want to be as realistic as possible with the approaches and stuff like that, you need something like that. So I was very impressed. So they've got a partial close down of Terminal 1, which is currently under construction. So again, that's a nice little addition there to try and match what it looks like and what's actually happening in real life. And they've also got like an extended configurations menu as well, which I'll go on to that in a minute. It's got a little bit of a config tool. System requirements, again, you can have a look at that. I'll pause the video and you can just have a quick gander over that and see what you think. It's nothing too heavy, to be honest. It's just a standard recommended sort of specs and things like that you'd need to be able to run P3D, along with some add-ons in a reasonable way anyway. So it's not something I would consider to be sort of overly demanding on hardware, even though it is overly demanding, if you get what I mean. So that included software then. So it comes with its own configurator tool, which it's got the SimWings logo there, the flight simulator software. You can see a top-down look of the airport or view of the airport. On the right-hand side, you've got traffic settings, dynamic apron lights, if I can even talk, static object settings, Europier and runway settings, stuff like that. You can change all of that according to what you want, including which runways they're using for takeoff and landing, which is actually pretty interesting as well, and pretty realistic because they do have a preferential runway system at Heathrow. Sometimes I think they change it like every 2 weeks or every week or something like that. It changes, and obviously it will also depend on the wind as well. But you know, if you want to check that out and sort of mess around with the settings, it's entirely up to yourself. So, what is my final verdict on this particular piece of scenery? Well, as somebody who has been a huge fan of EGLL in the simulator world, and have really wanted to actually get the scenery working and to get a working version of the scenery that I can play about with and make some really nice videos with and stuff like that, I would say this is definitely going to be a 9 out of 10, a solid 9 out of 10. Again, the only reason it's a 9 and not a 10, and this is me being very, very critical as always, is for needing to really turn down the settings quite a bit and to do a little bit of fiddling around in the simulator to get things running smoothly. But again, that's me being extremely critical, because you can sort of expect that from a very complex piece of scenery anyway. So I'm not sure whether it could be any further optimised. It probably could if they would have spent even more time on it. But again, they wanted to get this piece of scenery out for people, and you know, there's a limit to what you can do in the amount of time that you've planned to get something released. So this particular version, again, it's a 9 out of 10. And that's literally just because some aspects could be improved in terms of performance. I don't know whether anything could have been done in terms of avoiding that issue that's caused by the shaders. I don't think there's much that Aerosoft could do about that, or SimWings, because, again, that's down to these third-party shader tools, which can sort of mess things up. So that's sort of out of their hands. It's nothing they can do about that. But anyways, as always, straight to the point. I don't like to go into too much detail when it's not required. The rest of it, I'm sure you'll find out when you go ahead and purchase it, if you do so, or if you've already got it. But yeah, that is my review of Mega Airport London Heathrow Professional for P3D version 4 by SimWings or Aerosoft, whichever one you want to call it. They both had a sort of an impact in the development of this particular piece. So that's all I can say about that. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'm hoping to get some more flights and full flight videos done from and to Mega Airport London Heathrow Professional very, very soon. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.